Have you ever walked into a place, just a regular place, somewhere you've been before, and felt that strange little whisper in your gut? Like something's off? Like the walls are holding on to a secret? Type where you're watching this from in the comments. I want to know who's here with me right now. And hey, type 1 if you love raw, emotional stories that peel back the truth, and type 0 if this isn't your thing. I just want to make the kind of stories you actually feel. No faking, no filters. Now, let me take you back to a warm Tuesday morning. I was standing on the cracked sidewalk outside the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, holding a plain manila envelope. The air smelled like pine and diesel. The cicadas were singing that loud summer song, and the sun had already started baking the paint off the old patrol cars. Everything felt still. I wasn't there for anything dramatic. No mission, no warning. I was just dropping off a sealed communication from the State National Guard. I'd done it before, dozens of times. Just walk in, sign a form, shake a few hands, maybe sip some stale coffee if I had time. But that morning wasn't like the others. Because the second I stepped through those old glass doors, something changed. Not in the way people talked, not in the way they looked at me, but in the way the air itself felt. Like the room had inhaled and forgot how to exhale. My name is Amara Fulton. I've worn the uniform for 24 years. I've stood beside presidents, walked foreign soil in combat boots, and pinned medals on heroes who never came home. But inside that quiet Southern Sheriff's Office, where the American flag still flapped above the parking lot, I felt more out of place than I ever had overseas. The walls looked familiar, those faded beige ones with old bulletin boards and pictures of sheriffs long retired, and yet everything in my gut said something's about to happen here, and it won't be small. There was a rookie deputy behind the front desk, young, polite, eyes wide like he hadn't yet learned to hide his thoughts. He gave me a smile, awkward, unsure, but respectful. The kind of smile you give someone you were told to fear, but never had the guts to question why. I smiled back, because that's what I do. I've learned over the years that before the storm hits, there's always silence. And that day, that morning, I was standing right in the eye of it. If you're still with me, stay close. Because what happened next didn't just shake one room. It sent shockwaves all the way to the Pentagon and destroyed the careers of men who thought no one was watching. This is Mr. Alex Stories. I remember the way the place softened once I stepped past the lobby, like it didn't know whether to brace for authority or settle into civility. There was a rhythm to the station life, radios murmuring in the background, the occasional burst of laughter from the locker room, phones ringing with that strange mix of urgency and routine. You could tell this building had been through decades of shifts and seasons, but it hadn't quite caught up with the century it was living in. Still, I stayed warm. That's who I am. The rookie, the same one behind the desk earlier, kept hovering around, just enough to seem helpful, not enough to get in the way. He had a name tag that read, Stark. Fresh out of academy, I figured. He'd nod every time I spoke, like I was a live lecture he didn't want to miss a word from. He reminded me of someone I once mentored in Kabul. Quiet, serious, overly apologetic for things that weren't his fault. I saw a good heart behind the nervousness. I smiled at him once just to make him breathe easier, and that was enough. From then on, I was ma'am with extra reverence. Later that morning, I sat in on a briefing. Wasn't required, but leadership's not about what's required, it's about presence. The lead on the session was a young officer, Moreno, Latina, sharp. She'd been promoted too fast, but not undeserved. Her stance was too stiff, though, shoulders too far back, trying to overcompensate for doubt. I noticed it immediately. After the meeting, I asked her quietly if I could offer a small adjustment. She nodded, so I moved behind her, gently brought her elbows in, repositioned her balance. Stand like you belong, not like you're asking permission, I told her. She didn't speak for a moment, then just nodded again, eyes slightly wet, but steady. That kind of guidance? It sinks deeper than words. It reminded me of when I was a young captain, over-practicing my salutes and hoping someone would tell me I was enough. Over the next few days, the tone around the station changed. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I became part of the rhythm. Morning coffee runs, little updates on case statuses, offhand questions about tactics or discipline. I wasn't lecturing. I was weaving myself into the fabric. I brought in donuts one morning. No big gesture, just glazed and plain, with one Boston cream in the box because some part of me remembered that was the chief's favorite. Small things. Quiet respect. Even the old janitor, Mr. Liu, started cracking jokes when I came through. He'd tip his mop handle like a cane and call me Commander-in-Charm. I laughed more than I expected to. The station still felt tense, but I was finding the pockets of warmth. But not every glance felt easy. There was Sergeant Maynard, older. Been there too long to be curious, not long enough to retire. His smile never reached his eyes. When I passed him in the hallway, his shoulders never dipped, even out of courtesy. And when I spoke, especially when I corrected protocol, he'd tilt his head slightly like my words needed to be measured before accepted. Not questioned, just inspected. I saw him once, standing in the doorway to the evidence room, watching me speak with Moreno and Stark. Just watching. He didn't blink much, didn't shift weight like normal people. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to register. A slow, quiet leer dressed as professionalism. I didn't react. Not yet. Because everything still felt tolerable, manageable, like heat that hasn't become fire. There was a moment that week, just a small one, that stuck with me more than it should have. I was coming back from the vending machine, struggling to twist open a bottle of water. Old combat injury acting up in my wrist. Stark noticed. He stepped over without a word, took it gently, cracked the seal, and handed it back. He said nothing. Neither did I. But the kindness, it was rare, real. That unspoken moment of care, it didn't feel like rank. It felt like something older than uniform. Something human. And for a second, I forgot where I was. That second would cost me later. Because when people like Maynard notice warmth, they don't see connection, they see weakness. And they always move toward it. The break room was always too cold. Fluorescent light humming overhead, plastic chairs pulled up to metal tables, a vending machine that blinked out of order more than it didn't. Stark had offered to grab me something from the diner down the block, but I'd declined. I needed quiet. Alone time. Just 30 minutes without uniform speak. So I sat, alone, nursing lukewarm coffee and half a turkey sandwich. The station was quiet. Too quiet for midday. But I figured the team was out on patrol or filing reports and back. I remember the way the light shifted through the blinds, sharp slats across the linoleum like bars. Then I heard it. A voice half lowered but not hidden, sliced from the hallway. Male. Raspy. Disdain masked as humor. She's got more medals than brains. Affirmative action gone too far. Followed by a second voice. A chuckle. Muted but complicit. I didn't move right away. I didn't flinch. I didn't stand or slam my fist into the table like I might have once done years ago when I still thought justice worked quickly. I just sat there. Let the words sink. Let the ache rise up from somewhere old, somewhere buried beneath years of training and ceremony, and standing at attention even when my knees ached. I took one more sip of that bitter coffee. Not because I was thirsty, but because I needed a second to anchor myself. Maybe it wasn't meant for me to hear, or maybe it was. That thought played on repeat like a skipping record in my mind, because sometimes people whisper just loud enough. I walked out slowly, my footsteps soft even, my expression unreadable. Not cold, not hurt, just neutral. The kind of face you wear when you've been here before. I passed Maynard in the hallway. He looked at me, blinked once, then looked away. No smirk, no apology. Just that empty, indifferent stare some men wear when they think you're decoration in their world. I said nothing. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing I'd heard. That night in the hotel room, the silence felt heavier than usual. It was one of those chain hotels, the kind with beige walls, plastic-wrapped cups in the bathroom, and a generic art print above the bed. I sat at the desk with my boots still on, journal open, pen in hand, and didn't write a single word, not at first. I just stared at the page. The hum of the air conditioner was the only thing filling the room. It sounded like static, like a voice trying to break through but never quite clear enough to understand. I could have written about the insult, could have written about Maynard, but I didn't. Instead, I wrote about posture, how my spine stiffened the moment I heard the words, how my shoulders tightened like armor, how my jaw had clenched so subtly I didn't realize until the ache settled in. I didn't write about pain, not directly. I just described the physical response. I didn't have to explain the rest. And even though no one was there to see it, my eyes stung, not from sadness, not really, but from the sheer weight of knowing that after all these years, after all the medals, deployments, speeches, and sleepless nights in tents and war zones, I was still being asked to prove I belonged. I closed the journal without signing the page, laid back on the bed, arms crossed over my chest. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't sleep in full. Because something had cracked open inside me that day. Not broken. No, I don't break that easy. But the seal that kept my emotions folded, pressed, and hidden in clean lines, it loosened. And I found myself thinking, not about the insult, but about Stark. His gentleness, his silence. The way he looked at me when I spoke, like my words had gravity. Not because of my rank, but because of me. I found myself wondering if he heard the comment too. Wondering if he felt the shift in the air afterward. Wondering if, when he looked at me the next day, there'd be pity or something else. Something I wasn't supposed to want. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, and somewhere, deep inside the quiet, a question began forming. A dangerous one. What if I let someone see me? Not the general, not the soldier, just me. Would I still be respected? Or would I be reduced again? My eyes drifted shut sometime past 3, but that ache? It stayed with me. The first thunder cracked around 1900 hours. I was standing near the northern wing of the sheriff's station, midway through reviewing the security logistics for an overnight simulation, standard procedure, nothing fancy. The clouds had started gathering by late afternoon, but we all figured it would pass. It didn't. Instead, the sky split like a frayed wire and poured itself over Franklin County in a tantrum of rain and wind, the kind of storm that doesn't ask permission, just shows up and breaks the furniture. I remember glancing at the window, watching the trees bend in unnatural shapes. My reflection flickered in the glass, a faint silhouette in a starched uniform, and for a moment, it didn't look like me. It looked older, weathered, watching itself from somewhere else. Then the power cut. Not gradual, not polite. Just dark. All at once, the overhead lights snapped off, radios sputtered static, hallway fluorescents blinked twice and died. Then silence, thick and fast, as if the building had lost its breath. Somewhere in the evidence room, a junior officer let out a small startled yelp. Papers rustled. A printer coughed and went still. I stepped forward instinctively. "Everyone stay calm," I said, not loud, not frantic, just firm. A voice shaped for dark rooms and worse days. "We trained for worse than this. Emergency Protocol 3B. Move with your flashlights. Buddy system. Moreno, take hallway 2. Stark, rally the tech team. Secure backup access points." Feet began to move. Orders repeated. Radios checked. Flashlights clicked on like fireflies trying to organize themselves. The red emergency lights buzzed to life, casting the station in a blood-tinted glow. We looked like ghosts in a furnace. And still, the thunder grumbled, a low warning growl overhead. I was walking back toward the operations table, still mentally calculating what systems we'd lost, when I heard boots behind me. Not hurried, not panicked, just deliberate. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Some leader you are," Maynard said casually, voice floating out of the dim. "Power's out, drills go sideways, and still, you people like commanding things in the dark." The words didn't land like a joke, they landed like a dare. I turned slowly, breath held just behind my teeth. "Excuse me?" I said, not because I hadn't heard, but because I wanted to offer him a sliver of redemption, a rope to pull himself back from the ledge. But he didn't take it. He smiled instead. That half-smile that pretends to be nothing, but drips with intention. The kind of smile people give you when they want to get away with something, and almost always do. He didn't say anything else, just looked me up and down, turned, and walked into the shadows beyond the stairwell. His boots thudded once, twice, then vanished into the storm-rattled silence. I stood still, hand resting against the edge of the operations table. Under my coat, my fist had curled so tight the leather of my glove creaked. But I didn't follow him, didn't shout, didn't flinch. Just let the storm speak for me. Thunder cracked again, closer this time. The windows rattled in their frames like they too were tired of being silent. I walked slowly back to the main control panel, the red backup lights drawing a halo around my boots. Stark appeared beside me, flashlight in hand, eyes wide but steady. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. I nodded once. "Systems coming back online in sectors," he said. "Give it 10. "Good," I replied. I didn't meet his eyes, didn't want to let him see what was behind mine. Not yet. But in that moment, in that flickering red half-light with the building pulsing like a wounded beast and the storm raging against the glass, I felt it. Something shift. Not fear, not even anger, but something older. That quiet calculation. The one you feel right before you decide whether you're going to let something go or write it into the bones of the room forever, and behind it all, beneath it, unspoken but breathing, was the other ache. The one that had nothing to do with Maynard. The one that surfaced when I noticed Stark, just a little too close. His silhouette cast long against the hallway wall, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. I wondered if he'd heard the comment, if he understood what it meant. And if he did, why he stayed close. Why he looked at me like he did even now. Why my heartbeat refused to settle even as the generators hummed and the lights flickered back into life. The station pulsed. The storm kept howling. And somewhere, deep in my gut, something unspoken turned its face toward me and whispered, "You're not just angry. You're awake." I didn't realize how much I was running until the days started to blur into one another. Until the morning rituals of my routine became just that, rituals. I started showing up later, not late enough to be noticed, but enough to make my absence felt. Just a little more distance between me and the station, between me and them, between me and the faces I'd once guided, advised, and led. The air in the station felt different, heavy, like it was still waiting for the storm to pass. But it wasn't the weather that unsettled me anymore. No, it was something closer, something quieter, something inside me that wouldn't stop turning over. So I started leaving earlier too. I took my reports back to my quarters, spent my nights hunched over a desk, a dim light casting long shadows across military-grade documents that had once been my lifeblood. I felt the weight of them now, but I couldn't remember why. The routine was comforting though. At least it kept my hands busy, made the hours pass without me noticing. But every now and then, I'd catch myself staring out the window, the reflection, my own, staring back at me. I looked powerful in the uniform. At least I used to. At least that's what I told myself when the mirror asked. But the longer I stood there, the more the uniform became a shell that didn't fit quite right anymore. Something was wrong in the reflection. Those eyes that used to carry command, now tired and hollow, like the weight of my own authority was slowly suffocating me. I hadn't expected it to feel like this, like I had so many walls built up, each one reinforced over decades of service. And now, suddenly, they were all too high. And maybe that was the point. Maybe I'd built them too high, too wide, and now no one, not even myself, could climb over them. One evening, I caught Stark watching me again. It wasn't direct this time. He wasn't hovering at my side, waiting for me to issue another command, but his gaze lingered from across the room, like he was trying to decipher the unreadable in me, trying to figure out why I was so far from where I once was. I had to force myself to turn away. Focus. My hands shook as I adjusted the data on the screen. Just routine stuff. Just keeping up appearances. Keeping the professionalism intact. But I knew. And he knew. The silence was almost louder than any words, and with it came the unspoken truth. The tension between us wasn't just a fleeting moment. It had settled in the walls of this place, just as much as the storm had raged through that first night. That was when the rookie deputy, what was his name again, came over. "General, are you okay?" His voice was quiet, unsure, hesitant, like he wasn't supposed to ask, but couldn't help himself. "You've been quieter. Is everything all right?" I wanted to brush it off, to tell him that everything was fine, that this was just how things went. that every officer had these moments, these lulls. But the lie stuck in my throat, and instead, I did what I always did. I smiled, sharply. I squared my shoulders. I spoke through the cracks in my voice, my gaze shifting to the floor. "Everything's fine," I said, a little too quickly, too curt. "Don't worry about it." He looked at me, searching my face like he could see through the cracks, but he didn't press it. I was grateful for that, though I didn't show it. But as he walked away, I felt the weight of his eyes lingering in the air, an invisible weight pressing down, heavy and uncomfortable. The rest of the night was just noise, background static. I retreated into my quarters again, sat at the desk, watched the minutes pass by. I knew I should have been reviewing reports, responding to emails, taking action. But every time I touched the keyboard, it felt like I was floating further away from everything that mattered. I left voicemails, so many messages, each one left unanswered, each one sinking deeper into the voicemail box that I refused to empty. The calls I made, they were supposed to bring something back, something stable, a voice that could bring me back to myself. But each time, I replayed the messages, listened to the words, but the silence afterward felt longer and longer. It was all an echo. I sipped cold coffee, swallowed bitterness, and stared at the phone screen, wishing for the sound of someone's voice that didn't feel like it was a world away. The room started to close in on me, cold, sterile, boxed in, and I couldn't even tell what I was searching for anymore. I couldn't tell whether it was the connection I needed or whether it was the chaos that I was running from. Maybe I was just tired, maybe that's all it was. But even so, when I looked up at the window again, the reflection didn't change. The same tired eyes staring back, a mask of authority, and yet, behind it, something more human. I felt the ache again. It wasn't the kind of ache that asked for permission to hurt. It just came, like the storm, unexpected, relentless. And there, in the quiet, a thought flickered. A thought I hadn't dared acknowledge until that very moment. What if I wasn't meant to carry all this anymore? What if I'd carried it for too long? And worse, what if I wanted something more than just the weight of these damn uniforms, these responsibilities, these endless days? What if I wanted to breathe without the pressure of constant expectations? What if I wanted to feel like I wasn't always running? A quiet confession, wrapped in the deepest part of me, buried under the layers of power, duty, and history, but I couldn't let it out. I couldn't let anyone see me crumble, not even him, not even Stark. I was alone in my office, staring at the darkened screen of my phone. The call had just ended, and yet the words lingered, an imprint on my mind I couldn't shake off. The voice on the other end, my close aide, a confidant who had always been there, a steady hand in an otherwise chaotic environment, had asked if I was okay. I wasn't. Not really. Not since that day. "Do you need time?" they had asked, the words tentative, careful, like they weren't sure whether to push further or let me be. But how could I explain it? How could I describe what I was carrying without sounding weak, without admitting the truth that I wasn't the soldier I used to be, the person who walked with strength, conviction, authority? No, I wasn't that person anymore, not since Maynard. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself before whispering into the phone. "I've tolerated a lot in my life, but I've never been laid hands on in uniform. Until now." There was a pause on the other side, then the quiet hum of someone swallowing their concern, keeping their voice level. The truth was that I had never imagined this moment, the humiliation of it, the betrayal of it. Sergeant Maynard, of all people, had stood in front of me, his hands shaking with something between rage and contempt, and slapped a confidential folder out of my hands, the files scattering across the cold tile floor. "You don't give orders here!" he had yelled, his voice cutting through the space like a blade. There was something in his eyes, something ugly, something that said he had been waiting for this moment, waiting for a chance to put me in my place. I remember the silence after that, the sound of my breath catching in my chest, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But what struck me most, what hurt the most, was the quiet that followed, the deep, suffocating silence that filled the room after he'd finished shouting. The sound of my heart pounding, my pulse racing, but nothing else, not a word from the deputies standing beside him. They'd looked away, avoiding my gaze, pretending not to see what had just transpired. I had stood there, my hands clenched at my sides, and in that moment, the uniform I had worn with such pride suddenly felt like a shackle. I could still feel it now. His words echoing in my mind, mocking me, reminding me of my place. And worse, the silence of everyone around me. The shame that rolled over me like a wave I couldn't stop. I spoke again into the phone, my voice barely above a whisper, the weight of my decision heavy in the air. Do I report this and lose the trust of every soldier I've mentored, or stay quiet and keep my dignity shattered? I didn't expect a response. Not right away. My aide didn't have an answer for me. None of us did. What do you do when the very foundation of everything you've built, everything you've worked for, crumbles in a single moment? The truth was, I could have reported Maynard, could have gone public, exposed the entire thing for what it was. But what would it have cost me? The trust of my team, my reputation, my future? I wasn't sure anymore. The silence stretched on. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Maynard's hand hitting the folder was there, mocking me, reminding me of how powerless I had felt in that instant. But the next morning, I didn't show up with a filled-out incident report. I didn't go to the Joint Chiefs with my statement demanding justice. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at my desk and recorded a video statement. The words came slowly, carefully, strategic, surgical. I didn't rant, didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look angry. I just stated the facts, detached, controlled. The video would be my message, my way of putting it all out there without the chaos of confrontation. I will not tolerate this in my ranks, I said, but I will also not destroy the trust I've spent years building with the soldiers I lead. I will not let this become their fight. This is mine to carry. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a decision. A quiet, deliberate decision. When I hit send, I knew the world would eventually see it. But for now, I had chosen silence. Strategic. Calculated. I packed my things slowly. Each movement deliberate. My uniform, once a symbol of everything I stood for, now felt like a weight. The dark blue fabric of the jacket seemed to press down on me, pulling at the very essence of who I had become. I folded it carefully, as I had so many times before, each crease sharp, exact. I didn't look at it as I placed it into my bag. I couldn't. But as I zipped the bag closed, I caught sight of the rookie deputy standing by the door, his eyes wide with confusion. He didn't know the truth, didn't know the full story. All he knew was that I was leaving. I turned to face him, the words coming out softer than I'd intended. "Keep your chin up," I told him, my voice steady. "And when you see wrong, speak louder than they expect." He nodded, but there was uncertainty in his eyes, questions he wouldn't ask, but ones that would haunt him. I could see them in his gaze, but I couldn't answer them. Not now. Maybe never. And with that, I turned and left. The door clicked shut behind me, and the building went quiet once more. In the quiet that followed, I knew I'd made the right decision, or at least the only one I could make. I had chosen to walk away. Chose to leave the uniform behind, not because it didn't mean something, but because it had started to mean too much. What did I want now? What did I need? I wasn't sure. But I knew I wouldn't find it by staying in this place. I'd fought my battles. I'd earned my respect. But the war I had to fight now wasn't external. It was internal. It was mine to carry. And with that, I walked away. But I didn't leave broken. No. I left stronger, in ways that only time would reveal. I would carry this with me, but it would not define me. 2 weeks had passed. I had settled into a rhythm, one far removed from the chaos of military life. The silence felt louder now, more palpable. The days stretched out in front of me, an unmarked path where my feet left no trace. The world kept moving, faster, louder, but I was standing still. In the echo of my own decisions, the weight of them, the quiet aftermath of choices I'd made with nothing more than my resolve to guide me. But of course the past never truly lets go. It lingers, like a shadow that follows you wherever you go. I had assumed that by walking away I'd left it all behind. But that wasn't how life worked. It never was. The phone rang that afternoon, its shrill tone breaking the silence I had come to rely on. I stared at it for a moment, unsure if I was ready to hear whatever news it had to bring. But I knew deep down that it was inevitable. The past always finds a way of catching up to you. I answered it. His voice, soft, hesitant, carrying a weight of its own, came through. "They're gone," he said. "Transferred. Internal affairs came down like a hammer after your video. We didn't know you had that kind of reach." I felt my heart tighten in my chest. For a brief moment, I was back in that room. The sterile military corridors, the coldness of the walls, the stares that had followed me as I walked away. The weight of their silence had been enough. But hearing those words from him, it hit differently. "They're gone?" I asked, though the answer had already been delivered. I couldn't explain it. I wasn't sure I wanted to. His voice broke through again, quieter now. "We didn't expect it. No one did." I paused, letting the silence linger. It wasn't an awkward silence, not this time. It was a silence that said everything, a space between words that I didn't need to fill. In that silence, I could almost feel the collective breath of everyone in that station, those who had watched, those who had turned away, those who had silently cheered me on but never said a word. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be proud of it. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about victory or revenge. It wasn't even about them. It was just about resolve. I spoke again, my voice low, barely above a whisper. It wasn't reach. It was resolve. There was a pause on the other end. The deputy, his name, I still didn't remember it, was processing what I had just said. I could hear the wheels turning in his mind. This wasn't the way he had expected it to go. This wasn't the way I had expected it either. We were both standing at the edge of something, looking out into the unknown. Neither of us had the answers, not really. He let out a long, almost imperceptible sigh before responding. I thought it would be harder, getting rid of them. But when they saw what you put out there, it didn't seem to matter anymore. I could feel his words hanging in the air. There was no praise in his voice, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had happened. No triumph, no shame, just facts. In the silence that followed, I didn't know what to say. There was nothing left to say. Everything had been said. Everything had been done. I glanced out the window, watching the sky shift from dusk to night. The stars were barely visible behind the clouds, a soft glow of light struggling to break through. The world outside felt distant, like it wasn't mine to touch anymore. It was as though, with every passing moment, I had been slowly untethering myself from everything that had once defined me. The uniform, the chains, the expectations, all of it. Gone. But the silence remained, a heavy weight. He broke it first. "We owe you an apology," he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice, the regret that had settled in. We didn't know what we were walking into. We didn't see it, not really. I felt the bitterness rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. There was no room for bitterness now. There was no room for anger. Not anymore. "Don't," I said softly. "There's nothing to apologize for. You didn't know, and neither did I." It was a strange thing, this conversation. A moment of reckoning, of realization that none of us had truly understood what was happening until it was already too late. We had all been pieces on a board, playing the game without ever seeing the full picture. I could feel the weight of his gaze through the phone line, even though he wasn't there. "I'm not sorry for what I did," I added, the words coming out with a quiet conviction. "But I won't pretend that it didn't come with a cost." The deputy didn't respond. His silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was an understanding. We both knew there was no need to fill the space with unnecessary words. He had said it himself. He hadn't known. And in a way, I hadn't either. I hadn't known how it would feel to make the decision to walk away from everything I had known, everything I had built. But I knew now. "I should go," he said eventually. "I just wanted you to know, they're gone. It's over." I closed my eyes and let out a breath. "Yeah, it's over." The line went silent. There were no goodbyes, no promises of contact again. Just a quiet understanding that this moment, this exchange, was the end of something, but not the end of everything. The truth is, once you make a decision like that, once you burn those bridges, you can't unmake it. You can't go back. And there's no closure to be found in these kinds of moments. Only a kind of painful peace, the kind that comes when you know you've done what you had to do, even if it cost you everything. The deputy's voice faded as he hung up, and I was left with the sound of my own breath in the stillness. I stood up, walked across the room, and looked out the window again. The world outside had shifted, but I hadn't. I wasn't sure what the future held. I wasn't sure if I was even ready to face it. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't walk away from it again, and that was enough for now. Some battles don't leave bruises, they leave questions. Deep, gnawing questions that worm their way into your soul when you least expect them, crawling through the cracks of the decisions you made, the choices you've lived with. Would I still have done it if they weren't watching? If I had the chance to walk away without the eyes of the world on me, without the pressure of their judgment weighing on me every second? Would I have acted differently? Could I have been louder, braver, more forceful in demanding what I deserved? I can't answer that. Not fully. Not with the clarity I want. Maybe I was protecting my name. Maybe I was afraid of what would happen if I allowed myself to step into the chaos that would follow an open confrontation. Maybe I was afraid of breaking something I couldn't fix. But then, there was that moment, when everything had stopped. When silence had taken the place of anger. When I stood in that room, that sterile, cold room facing Maynard, his hand raised against me, his voice full of contempt. What if I had responded with anger, with retaliation? What would that have accomplished? It wasn't about what I deserved. It was about what I could live with. And perhaps, for me, the strongest thing I could do was walk away. Silence, as I'd learned, could be its own form of power. But that doesn't mean it was easy, or that it didn't come with a price I had to pay and one I may never fully understand. I chose quiet because I didn't know if there was another way. I chose it because, for all the noise in the world, I wasn't sure that loud voices would have been enough to make people listen, so I made my statement without raising it. I made my mark not by confronting the storm head-on, but by stepping away, forcing the storm to look at me, forcing it to watch me leave, and in that silence I made it clear. I wouldn't let it break me. But was my response too measured? Too quiet? Or was it the most powerful act of all? The act of taking control of a situation that was designed to strip me of it? Was my silence not weakness but strength? Was it defiance, without a single word being spoken? And if I'm being honest with myself, I don't know. I don't know if I would have done it any differently. I don't know if speaking louder, confronting Maynard in front of his team, in front of everyone, would have changed anything. Maybe it would have made things worse. Or maybe it would have given me some fleeting satisfaction, a small victory. But in the end, what would that have meant? Would I have been any more at peace? Would I have been any closer to the person I want to be? Or would I have simply fed the fire that was already threatening to consume me? I can't say for sure. But there is one thing I do know. Silence has a power that we often underestimate. When the world expects chaos, when they expect confrontation, the quiet response can rattle them in ways no shout can. So, as I sit here now, looking back on everything that happened, I don't have a clean answer. I don't have the right answer. What I have is my own journey, my own quiet resistance. And the question, always the question, remains. What would you have done if someone crossed that line, in public, in uniform, in front of everyone? Would silence have felt safer, more calculated? Or would it have felt louder, like a statement in itself, a declaration that some things can't be fixed by words alone? The truth is, I don't know the answer. But I think the question is worth asking.